afternoon if you're in the UK, and a good evening if you are in India to this session. I'm Dilip Chinoy, the Secretary General of FICCI. A very warm welcome to all of you. May I now invite Mr. Philip Bouvard, Director JCB, to set the scene by talking about COVID and the businesses. So, Mr. Philip Bouvard.
Thank you very much, Secretary General. I'm honoured to be asked to do this. I've worked with Gunvina on and off for many years, and I've known Karan probably for, must be nearly 20 years now, Karan, since we first did those original Indian meetings. And then since then, I think we, as JCB, had expanded our workforce and our factories in India exponentially. We had found a key niche market in India, and we became in love and embedded in India in a way that I can only say I feel rather evangelical about. To do business in India, you have to love India, and to love India, you can do a lot of good business. So we have had a fantastic time there. I was asked by Gunvina to really set the scene for COVID-19 and how it's changing the way we're living and our business lives. And I'm sure, Karan, you and I should have perhaps had a word beforehand, but what I'll do is I'll talk about us as a company and what we've seen and what we've observed. And I think it's best to start, how long have I got? Is it 5 minutes, or is it 5 minutes okay?
Yeah.
So what I'll do is I'll start by saying that we first saw the CV19 issue when we had our factory in Shanghai given notice to close. Simple as that, straightforward. No discussion, no argument, no time, just we had to close. We only employ 300 or 400 people in Shanghai, but we also at the same time saw issues with our supply chain coming out of China. And the first problems we saw was not being able to cross borders within the States. And if you did, there was no argument, you had 14 days quarantine, which is a theme that's run throughout the world. So round about the end of January, we realized there was a problem. And at that time, we started increasing our supply chains in India and Europe. And of course, the three areas we were bringing in for our global supply chain was China, India, and Italy, Germany and Spain. So we saw this CV19 issue ripple from east to west. And on a computer every day, all our machines are logged. So we know if machines are being turned on and off. And we saw we saw literally everything falling off in Southeast Asia. It had already fallen off in China. Then the whole of India virtually collapsed. And then it was followed by a collapse of machine usage in Europe. When we got as far as America, it wasn't so bad, but we saw a massive collapse in Brazil. So this CV19, it rippled from east to west. Luckily, we'd always, as a company, multi-sourced our supply chains. And when I say multi-sourced our supply chains, that's for international business. So we were fortunate we could increase the production in one part of the world while the other part was locking down and catching up. But of course, we eventually met the circle and we couldn't do it anymore, and regrettably had to close down our factory in the UK. UK factories were never asked to close by our government, whereas our factories in India, China, Brazil were asked to close. The issue we had actually closing our factory in India, where we have over the last certainly 15 years focused on indigenizing as much as possible. And for the president, for Lord Bilimoria, I'm sure you'd be pleased to know that 97% of all backhoe loader manufacturing components are made in India for our Indian backhoe. So we're almost there. The last 3% I think is Japan, for reasons that I'm not going to go into now, but it's a special manufacturing component. So we had a situation where we've been pushing very hard in India. We've now got 6 factories. We're opening in Gujarat shortly, purely for export. We've got 35% of women working on our shop floors in our Jaipur factories. So we've done everything we have been asked to do by the government of India, and we're very, very proud. We had a problem when we shut down our Indian factory. We had a lot of labor force that couldn't go anywhere. So we got dispensation from the local government and rubber stamped by Delhi to serve hot meals every day to everybody that was literally camped out around the factory. They couldn't travel when we were shut down. So I'm pleased to say we eventually cooked and distributed over 200,000 meals during that period around Balabgarh and Faridabad. And then all our employees contributed one day of their salary to the PM Care Fund in the fight against COVID-19. So we did our bit, and I was very proud how our Indian staff and our Indian labor force really reacted. But we had virtually nil sales in April and May. We were paralyzed in India, although we were seeing the machines operating harder and harder throughout April, May, and June. The curve was climbing, where we nearly had 85% of our machines operating in India of the pre-COVID. So if you look at February, look at June, we were back to 85% operational. So I think that the lesson to be learned from all of this is always try and expect the unexpected. But the most important thing is people work with each other and they need help. Everybody in business working with us, all of our employees have been fantastic in very, very difficult times. And we need to understand how we can operate in the new normal. I am actually concerned that in India, the virus might not be totally under control as we move into the colder season. We have the same problem in the United Kingdom. And our Prime Minister this afternoon will stand up and tell us that he's putting measures to squeeze down a little bit again. We have something in the UK called the flu season. In October, we're inundated with chest infections and coughs and colds. And I'm worried that the northern part of India might well be the same as it gets chillier, as it goes into the evenings. So we are going to do about 30% less business this year than we did in 2019. But the indicators are that in 2020, we might very well be back up to 2019 levels. So we are gearing up to do that. Infrastructure expenditure in India, roads and highways, is a leading growth driver. And the rural Indian economy is strengthening slowly. I've spoken to a couple of the leading bankers in India who are looking at ways of producing credit for people in rural markets, because the non-banking finance companies have very little liquidity or appetite at the moment, which is hurting us slightly. So I'll stop there. I could go into a lot more detail with other countries. I've spoken a little bit too much about India probably, but please, ask me any questions. I'd be very happy to fill in the answers if I can.
Thank you very much for that, Philip. And I had the pleasure of actually visiting your Jaipur factory and meeting that woman welder who actually became very famous in India.
I have a very interesting story. She became known as the robot lady,
yes,
because she could weld faster and more accurately than these high cost Japanese robots we had. She had this talent, which was quite extraordinary. She went all over the country winning competitions. We're immensely proud of her, but she was one of a cohort we brought in at the beginning of 30. We always said we wanted 35% female shop floor, but she was a superstar, still is.
Thank you for that. And may I now invite Dr. Sangeeta Reddy, President FICCI, to initiate the conversation with Lord Karan Bilimoria. Over to you, President. President, you're on mute. You need to unmute yourself.
Okay. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's a pleasure to have with us both Philip and Karan, one from a major global earth-moving company, and the other the founder, chairman of one of the world's most loved beers, Cobra beer. So, good afternoon, good evening, a great pleasure, and I hope we're going to have a wonderful conversation. Karan, first let me congratulate you for taking over as president of the Confederation of British Industry, a first for CBI, wherein Indian-born British citizen is leading British industry, one more among the many firsts for you. And I believe, and it is well documented, that at 44, when you were made peer of the House of Lords, you were among the youngest serving peers, a former chancellor of the Thames Valley University, now University of West London, and you were the youngest university chancellor when appointed. So congratulations, we're very, very proud of you. For those who are listening in, Karan, apart from being the 7th Chancellor of the University of Birmingham, is also the chair of the University of Cambridge, Judge, Business School Advisory Board, and has been the independent crossbench peer in the House of Lords for 14 years. So a warm welcome. As we come to the end of 6 months of the pandemic that has hit all of us across the world, there still seems to be no exact date by which we can expect the world to be free of this catastrophe. We're here to discuss how leaders can take their companies and organizations out of the crisis, turn to business, bring back some sense of normalcy, and those who go beyond and actually thrive in the middle of this chaos. So let me begin by asking, before we move to the current situation and what you would suggest to companies and what they should do to handle the problem, I'd really like to invite you to share with our participants how your company, Cobra Beer, and its most fascinating journey, how you handle the ups and downs and emerge stronger. Lord Karan Bilimoria, over to you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Sangeeta. And congratulations to you on being president of FICCI. And of course, we are fellow Hyderabadis. So
absolutely.
Our families have known each other for many years. And Dilip, but good to see you as always. Dilip I've known since childhood, and he is also a Hyderabadi. So we've got a bit of a Hyderabadi mafia here today. And Philip, good to hear from you. And I will try and build on what you've said. Gunvina, thank you for inviting me. And I also see my old friend Devin Narang online as well. So great to be with all of you and great to be with FICCI. An institution that I've been so close to from the days going back to chairing the Indo-British Partnership when in 2003, 17 years ago, before I joined the House of Lords, and Narayan Murthy was my counterpart as the India chair, and that's when Philip and I, we used to interact a lot in those days. Then Narayan Murthy handed over to Sunil Mittal, and before Narayan Murthy, of course, before I joined, was Jamshed Irani. And it was a great Indo-British partnership that then led to the UK-India Business Council, which I'm proud to be the founding chairman of, which Philip was very supportive of from the very early days and is still very engaged with the UK IBC. So thank you for inviting me to do this. What I can say is that these last 6 months have just been extraordinary. The words unprecedented and there are no adjectives. We've run out of adjectives. This is the most challenging time that any of us have ever experienced. And it's been moving at a very, very fast pace. It's a health crisis, and the health crisis is one that is a new crisis. So again, with a disease that is new, you don't know how to deal with it. And we've been, what we were scared of in the beginning, many of the fears are still there now. The uncertainty is the one constant, constant uncertainty. We do not know what is going to be happening. The ambiguity continues to exist. So let's go back to March. And I remember very clearly, I was with the Prince of Wales, with Prince Charles on the 5th of March. I was at a day when I was at Birmingham University in my role as Chancellor, but I was also in between, had to go from London to Birmingham and then backtracked to Oxford, where I'm a fellow at Kellogg College, Oxford, and we were there to welcome our new Bynum Tudor Fellows. The existing Bynum Tudor Fellows were there to welcome our new Bynum Tudor Fellow, who's Prince Charles, the Prince of Wales. And there we were welcoming him. And this was the 5th of March, and people were shaking hands with each other. And we knew that there was there's something happening in China. There was a pandemic brewing. And there we were shaking hands with each other. 10 days later, 15th of March, it hit me from nowhere, and I was struck down with COVID myself. And a week later, Prince Charles himself succumbed to the disease, and soon after that, the Prime Minister Boris Johnson as well. Well, fortunately, Prince Charles and I got it relatively mildly. We were not hospitalized. It took me 2 weeks to recover. I lost my sense of smell and taste, which at that time was not an official symptom. Now it is. And it's very strange. I worked all the way through it, and luckily I was all right. The Prime Minister, unfortunately, Boris Johnson, had a much rougher time, and he was hospitalized, and thankfully he is all right. So I've experienced this disease myself, and of course, from a business point of view. And I remember we had a CBI meeting on the 16th of March, and I was in my bed and on the phone, and it was a series of meetings all day, and having just been struck down by this disease. And in the meeting, there was a part of it was a board meeting of CBI, and I was asked, Karan, look, you've gone through lots of challenges in your business. You're an entrepreneur. You started Cobra Beer from scratch, and I've nearly lost my business 3 times. I said, what do you think, what help is going to be needed? We're going into this crisis. And this was just before lockdown, a week before lockdown. And I said, without even flinching, what business is going to need is cash. We're going to see a shock in demand. We didn't know at that time there was going to be a lockdown, where in my case, in our industry, we supply 7,000 Indian restaurants in the UK alone. Those restaurants closed on the 23rd of March. And for 3.5 months until the 4th of July, they were shut. And with a few doing takeaways, on the whole, they had no business. And of course, the knock-on effect is right back the supply chain to us. And that's the thing about this crisis, is it's a demand shock and it's a supply shock. It's a health crisis that's impacted the economy, and it's reverberated around the world. And that reverberation and the domino effect is just extraordinary. So when you're in that position, and I said without flinching, I said, what business is going to need is cash. So the government has got to be able to offer loans to businesses. And those loans have to be guaranteed by the government, because the banks will not be, they will be worried. They will not want to take the risk. You're going to have to give guaranteed loans. And we always had a government loan guarantee scheme in the UK for many years. In the early years of Cobra, I had 2 of those loans totaling £250,000. And I would not have been able to get the brand to take off without those loans. And in those days, they were guaranteed 75% and 85% by the government, and the bank taking the balance of the risk. And I said, if you do that sort of, and that sort of loan exists even now, before the crisis. And I said, if you give that sort of a guarantee, it'll work a bit, but it will not work enough. The government is going to have to give a 100% guarantee. And what happened? Germany and Switzerland started giving 100% guaranteed loans. We didn't. And the Chancellor, Rishi Sunak, obviously we're very proud, he's only 40 years old, and he's number 2, potentially a future prime minister. And I mean, I've been saying for many years, it's not long before we will have an Indian as prime minister of the UK. So that day is looking very, very, very close. And his measures that he brought in the middle of March were fantastic. I mean, by any standards in the world, if you look at the percentage of GDP, the job retention scheme, where the government paid 80% of people's salaries, that saved 9 million jobs. On top of that, it saved another 2.5 million self-employed people's jobs. The loan schemes that he brought up, the rates reliefs, the grants to small businesses, the delaying of taxes, the delaying of VAT. Phenomenal measures brought in by the government to help business. But this 80% loan was not really working. The money wasn't flowing through. And I kept persisting and pushing for the 100% guaranteed loans. And I kept pointing to Germany and to Switzerland. And sure enough, about a month later, the Chancellor listened, and we got the 100% guaranteed loans, called the bounce back loans, up to £50,000. Over 1 million of those loans have now been granted out to businesses. It has saved thousands of businesses. And the average loan is about £30,000 that people have taken. And those small loans have saved lots of SMEs and small businesses. So I think that one of the lessons I've learned is, if you've got a government that's willing to listen, if you've got a chancellor, finance minister who's willing to listen and adapt that makes a huge difference. With the job retention scheme, which was going to come to an end in May, with the CBI said, no, you've got to extend that. They listened, and it's now been extended to October. Now, here we are in the UK facing a second wave. If you look at the graph, we flattened the curve of the virus. Now it's going back up, and it's going back up exponentially. So people are obviously scared. What we're trying to do at all costs is to stop another national lockdown, because that lockdown was hugely damaging in many, many ways. It was damaging in that our economy shrunk by 20%. And in the first 6 months, and in the second quarter, 20% drop in GDP. The hospitals were focused on coronavirus, so other illnesses. I mean, Sangeeta, you know from your business, a very successful business, and when you got a focus, even the private hospitals in the UK were all making beds available for coronavirus. We set up in the UK these Nightingale hospitals. I mean, China built hospital in days. We said only the Chinese could do it. No, we showed we could do it as well. With the collaboration, this is one of the lessons I've learned from the crisis, is collaboration works. Top-down doesn't work. And we had the government, the NHS, the government through the armed forces, including Gurkhas, the engineers, the University of East London, and the private sector in the form of the Excel Centre, the biggest exhibition centre in the UK, all came together, and we created a 4,000 critical bed hospital in 9 days. And that's the power of collaboration. Then we replicated that around the country in Birmingham and in the north. And we've now got these Nightingale hospitals as a backup in case we have the hospitals overflowing. So the collaborations work. We've got those Nightingale hospitals even now as we look in to the future, into this uncertainty of a potential second wave. And the next thing I've learned is also the community spirit. Now, Philip spoke about this, how the employees have given back, how you spoke about the percentage of their employment, their salaries that people gave, which was to distributing meals. I mean, these restaurants of ours that were shut with no business. We were approached by Prince Charles's charity, the British Asian Trust, that I think Philip is also involved with. And they said, can we have a big curry night in? Can you help us, Cobra Beer? We got together with the industry. We got together with our restaurants. And we had hundreds of restaurants that opened that were shut to do takeaways. And instead of a big curry night in, we did it over 10 days. And we got the British public to donate money for COVID victims in South Asia, and including India, of course. And we raised over £50,000 through the efforts of the restaurants, through the efforts of Cobra Beer, through the efforts of the British Asian Trust. And that's that community spirit. Restaurants were on their own accord delivering hundreds of meals to hospitals, to doctors and to nurses off their own back, just to help the communities. That community spirit I saw really worked in this crisis. And I want to leave as much time for question and answers. I mean, do you want me to stop around now-ish in about 1 or 2 minutes, or do you want me to carry on?
No, Karan, it'll be great if you wrap up in 1 or 2 minutes, and then I have one more question for you, and then we'll open it to further.
Okay. So if I then now link it to my priorities as the first sort of ethnic minority Indian president of the CBI in its 60-year history, there are 4 things that I really want to focus on more than others. One is I want to focus on the global Britain aspect. I really think that Britain is not a superpower anymore, but the small country of just 1% of the world's population is still very much a global power with global influence. And we have a great combination of hard and soft power. And I want to continue to promote global Britain as one of the largest recipients of inward investment. We're one of the top 2 or 3 countries of inward investment in the world, which is fantastic. And I want to continue that. We've just had a trade deal with Japan, which is a fantastic free trade deal that we've just signed. The next is to promote entrepreneurship. The CBI, of course, is renowned for having the FTSE 100, FTSE 250, Britain's big business as members and the voice of big business, but it's actually 190,000 businesses employing 7 million people, 1/3 of the private sector workforce. And the third, so to have entrepreneurship promoted within the CBI. The third is diversity, to promote diversity in business, ethnic diversity in business, because at the moment there aren't enough ethnic minority members on the boards of British companies and in proportion to the population in the UK across business. And finally, universities and business working more closely together, particularly to do with research and development and innovation, which we're very, very strong in the UK, And if we put those two together, we could be even more powerful with R&D and innovation. So I'll stop there and leave it to a discussion. Thank you.
So thank you, Karan. That was fascinating to hear what you went through. I think March 5th, from shaking hands with Prince Charles to a week later saying you don't even want to breathe air that other people have breathed in. So that was a truly dynamic shift. I was particularly touched, of course, by the point that, like you rightly said, Philip made and you made as well, which is the collaborative spirit, the community spirit, and the fact that I think what is coming across the world are lessons of adaptability. So like Darwin said, it's not the largest, it's not the strongest who survive, but those who are the most adaptable. So quick insight from, we've heard of Lord Karan Bilimoria as the member of parliament, as the humanitarian, as the member of community. What did your business do? Besides, of course, conserve cash or take loans, what did your business do during this period?
The first thing that we did was to put people first. We didn't make a single person redundant. We preserved all the jobs, and of course the government was there to support as well. So I mean, our sales team were completely unable to do anything because their customers were closed, and 1/3 of our sales are through the supermarkets. And we were able to keep our breweries running, but the breweries were completely cut down in staff because there were certain members who had to be shielded for health reasons, for age reasons. So we couldn't produce our full range. So Cobra is available on draft, in cans, in small bottles, in big bottles, in 4-packs, and 12-packs, and 24-packs, and different SKUs. We survived for 3.5 months on one stock keeping unit, the big bottle Cobra in the supermarkets. That's all we had. That's all we had. And we survived on that one bottle, which is our most popular, of course, our most popular, it's the iconic.
And a lesson for the future.
Indeed. So you have to adapt, to your point. And we've shown, again, the adapting we're doing, using the technology we're doing now. Satya Nadella, who, of course, went, like I did, to Hyderabad Public School, head of Microsoft, said the adopting of technology that we've done in a couple of months, he said this in the middle of the crisis, would have taken years to adopt. I mean, we've had this technology, people weren't using it. Now we've adapted and adopted.
So this leads me to share, you were mentioning about Apollo, but truly, COVID has been a tremendous inflection point. We've been working with telemedicine for the last 20 years. And suddenly now the adoption has just gone through the roof because patients have begun to realize that they don't need to travel to the hospitals, and especially our out of town and out of country patients. So telemedicine has truly grown. Our mobile app has definitely grown. And the most significant one is not only did we kind of allocate about 2,500 beds for COVID treatment, but we partnered with a hotel, multiple hotel chains, and added another 4,000 beds, which was supervised via telemedicine for people to stay isolated. Because, in a typical Indian home, it's very difficult for most people to stay isolated. So some of these have been truly great lessons for across the world. So as we, preserve our humanity, and like you said, you didn't, let go of a single employee, as we find ways to adopt and create new business models, as we understand the importance of multilateralism and gender diversity and inclusivity, what is your view of the future? And this is going to be my last question before I turn this to, but where do you see us? Where do you see the world? Where do you see England? Where do you see India in a 12, 24-month period? From recovery to innovation to where do you see us?
The crystal ball at this stage is a very difficult thing to predict. I don't think anyone...
That's why we ask you. Why give you the easy questions?
However, that said, what I can predict is this, and that is that we have to continue to work collaboratively. Now, I'm seeing this in front of my eyes. One example, if I give you. At Oxford, we have developed a vaccine that is leading the global race at the moment. The partner of that vaccine is AstraZeneca. Now, AstraZeneca is a Swedish-British company actually headquarters at Cambridge. So in my role as the Cambridge Judge Business School chair, which I've actually just stepped down, I finished my 5-year term just before I took over the CBI role, their headquarters are in Cambridge. So you've got Oxford, Cambridge, Britain, Sweden, and who have AstraZeneca partnered with for a big chunk of the doses to be produced, but my friend Cyrus Poonawalla of the Serum Institute, who's got 1 billion doses. And I've met him yesterday. In fact, I'm going to be with him again today. He's here in London. They are producing hundreds of millions of doses. They're taking that risk, even if the vaccine fails for whatever reason. He's taking the risk so that it's ready the moment it gets approval. Now, that's international collaboration taking place. And that back to India, that's going to be exported as well. So that collaborative, I can see future, and we've got to make, and here's another thing, crises. An example was given in the Second World War, 1942, middle of the Second World War, started in 1939, finished in 1945, Winston Churchill commissioned the Beveridge Report. Now, the Beveridge Report, in the middle of a crisis, implemented after the war by the Labour government, which basically led to the welfare state, the NHS, the National Health Service that we have today. So in the middle of a crisis, you come up with something that changes a whole country's future. And from this crisis, we're going to come up with things that will be for the benefit of the future in the middle of a crisis. I can foresee that.
That's amazing. Sir Philip Bovera, I think you know so much about India. You've been through the equal pains. Where do you see? Let me focus the same futuristic question to you. Where do you see India, United Kingdom, and the world 12, 24 months from today?
That's again a very good question. I think that India will emerge as the flexible workshop of the region ahead of other countries in the region over the next 2 to 5 years. The potential for business within India is massive. You just look at 300 million people who are living with a certain standard, and maybe aspirationally another 700 million that would like that standard. Therefore, economically, if everything is balanced correctly, India has got to be the most potentially vibrant economic country on the planet. So that's my prediction on India. And also, there's still a lot of roads to be built, so we're going to keep making machines. So that's easy for us. The UK is going to have a difficult time. It's got $1 trillion it's got $2 trillion in debt. We have a young, vibrant Indian diaspora chancellor who brilliantly has spent this money. His test will be how to get it back. And I think that it's going to be difficult, it's going to be tough. I think that the UK has always really punched above its weight as a 1% of the world's population, but maybe 6th or 7th economically in the world. I think we've got to look to our history, particularly our Commonwealth history. JCB as a company does over 60% of its business in Commonwealth countries. I include the United Kingdom as a Commonwealth country, obviously. So, and we intend to keep expanding in that region, particularly in East and Central Africa. That's really important.
Thank you, Philip.
There's one more thing I'd like to just add. I think it's very important to keep your workforce very, very flexible. And the lesson we've learned from COVID is the first thing that happens is your supply chain and your customers go all over the place. You have a business plan where your supply chain moves nicely together to your manufacturing moves nicely to your customers. And of course, during CV19, we wound up with this all over the place. If you can get your labor force to keep being paid the same amount of hourly rate, but actually work flexibly for maybe as little as 20 hours a week or as many as 40 hours a week while they recover and while the businesses recover, this means you can still keep training your labor force and they're with you and they know that in the event of a downturn, you will support them. We've already tested this with one union and it was successful. We are going to be looking at possibly doing it with other unions in other countries around the world.
So that's perfect. I think that there is so much of significance which has been said by both of you. And before I thank you and conclude the session, I'm going to turn to Devin Narang, a good friend of everyone who's online, to ask a question. Devin, over to you. You need to unmute yourself.
Yeah, sorry, Sangeeta. Thanks for that. Hi, Karan. How nice to see you. You're looking full of enthusiasm as always. I have a slightly different question. With Brexit around the corner or almost in UK, how can we work together? How can UK and India work together? Let's forget COVID for a moment. What has to happen will happen. Nothing we can do about it. We can only live through it and, improvise from today. But how can we take advantage of Brexit to actually increase trade between the two countries? As you rightly said, that you see Britain as a global, still as a global power or business hub. How will things change? And how do you think we could take advantage of that?
When it comes to Brexit, that's happened, and all being well, we will get a deal in the coming weeks. I'm very confident that we will get a deal. British business overwhelmingly wants a deal. The British public, if you poll them, say they want a deal. Everyone wants a deal. So we want to try and get this deal, and hopefully we will get one. We've already shown, even before this implementation period comes to an end at the 31st of December, that we managed to negotiate this Japan deal. And one of the fears was that the European Union had over 50 free trade deals, huge deals like the Japan one, which when it was done with Europe was, I think, the biggest trade deal in history. Would we be able to roll them over? Well, we've demonstrated with the Japan deal that we can do it. And the Japan deal is a very good deal. If you look at the terms of it, it's a very good deal. Now, India and the EU, as Philip is very aware, from the time I was chair of the UK-India Business Council, has been trying to negotiate a free trade deal with the European Union and has not been able to all these years. Well, now we must try to have a free trade deal between India and the UK. And I think it's eminently possible to do one. And one of the things that's going to be, we've got to make sure services are very much included in it, because that's our strength in the UK, as well as manufacturing, but also movement of people. And on movement of people, we've made a huge headway already. For example, with students. I fought very hard for the 2-year post-graduation work visa to be introduced in 2008. It was taken away in 2012. But Boris Johnson became Prime Minister. He brought it back in for the whole world, but of course for India as well. So if we can have the movement of people, so movement of people for businesses between the two countries, professionals between the two countries, students and academics, and the collaboration, I think we could have a very good trade deal going forward. We must work on that.
So perfect.
My take on that is I agree with everything Karan has just said, but I would like to suggest that post-Brexit, we have already left, that we are a more flexible country to invest in than we're not shackled by some of the European regulations. Therefore, coming to the UK as Indian investors, we've seen a flood in the last 12 months. I would like to say that we need to flood the other way and get good partnerships with Indian companies. India is not an easy place to be on your own in. And everybody I talk to about doing business in India, I always say, find a good partner for technical help and distribution, and then grow from there. And also, India isn't one country. There's lots of different countries. So choose the right place and don't try and rule the whole thing at once.
So I think those were both great insights. And Mr. Philip Cobra, we will be calling upon you to please help guide Indian business in their partnerships with international and especially UK business. I take away that one very important line, that India will potentially be the most vibrant and potentially the most dynamic economy in the world. So that is something that I think has been super valuable to hear from you. And Karan, as always, your statesmanship, your ability to span concepts, logistics, ideologies, people, and humanities all in one breath and quite effortlessly has been breathtaking. So, we've really been interesting. I'm going to hand over to Praveen. But before I hand over, the last thing I'd really like to say is that FICCI looks forward to both of you spending more time and helping build these bridges of association between Indian business and businesses in the United Kingdom. And I believe there's a lot to be done. I think the potential is enormous on both sides, and we should stay in touch and continue to dialogue so that we come out of this crisis stronger than we were. So we're not building back better, we're building future. Dilip, back to you.
So there's a question from Uma H. Bibra. This is to Lord Karan Bilimoria. What is the government planning to do in the flu season coming in October? There is a fear that, of course, that it might get accentuated in October in the winter. And the second question is that she heard that collaboration community is the only way to work at this point. I totally agree, and thank you for reiterating this. Are we doing anything specific for the environment as well? As this is being even more with the COVID-19 situation. So two specific questions. One is, what are we doing for the flu season? And second, how do we address the environment issue going forward?
Yes, with the flu season, we've anticipated this. And of course, the virus, as we come into autumn and winter, we're seeing the second wave potentially starting to happen. So the government had already said we would give flu injections to everyone over the age of 65. So that's already happening. They might want to increase that to everyone over the age of 50 to encourage people to have the flu vaccinations. So that's one thing. The next thing is the testing. We have ramped up our testing from 2,000 tests a day in March to well over 250,000 today. And the testing technology, by the way, is really ramping up very quickly. And again, Sangeeta, you're probably aware of this, but in America, Abbott Laboratories have already got the Binax test, which is up and running, announced at the end of August, on a credit card size, slip of paper, lateral flow, with saliva, using just a swab. You can get a 15-minute result, 98% accuracy.
And Karan, Apollo has tied up with them. We will be among the first to offer it in India.
Now, look at that. It's a game changer. They're producing 10 million of them this month, 50 million next month. If we could have those available at $5 per test. And at the moment, you can't do it on your own. You need someone to administer it, but it's only a matter of weeks or months before we'll be able to do those at a factory, at home, at an airport. If the population could test itself in the UK twice a week, we would be on top of it, and we'd be completely able to operate full steam ahead. That's not available at the moment, but even with the testing technology we have at the moment, we're ramping that up to 500,000 tests a day by the end of October. So that's your first question. The second question to do with the environment. This is what I was talking about, the analogy of the beverage report. This is a time when we can say, let's not forget about net zero. And in the middle of all this at the CBI, we just released the Heat Commission. I chaired the Heat Commission, and we released a report on the importance of heat. Heat makes up 1/3 of carbon emissions. Heat makes up 40% of energy consumption. And a lot of that is from buildings and houses. So how do we make houses more environmental? Using heat pumps, using hydrogen. So we've got a whole strategy for that the government has now taken on board. COP26, we're going to be hosting COP26 in the UK next year. So here's a great opportunity for us not to forget the hugely important area of climate change and the environment in the middle of this crisis looking forward.
There's another one. Actually, this is what I'm paraphrasing what Dr. Sangeeta Reddy has been talking about. You see, the NHS in the UK is actually undergoing a certain kind of pressure currently. And there is health expertise in India available to actually enable the NHS to deliver surgeries faster, quicker, better, possibly even at a lower rate. So how do you see this collaboration going forward? Is there a possibility? What do what does India need to do, and what could the UK and India do together to enable this partnership?
So we're talking specifically about health partnerships. And this is where we have in the UK, the NHS, that is a hugely respected institution. And we also have a private health sector as well. So, let's not forget, we have companies like Bupa. Bupa operate in India as well. The health insurance, they have hospitals, care homes. But what we mustn't also forget is there's this huge care sector, the nursing homes in the UK. And the care sector alone in the UK, you have 1 million people being employed in the care sector alone, on top of the NHS. And what happened in Sweden and what happened in the UK is, with the care sector, we should have paid more attention to the care sector. Over half the sad deaths have taken place in the care homes. And now we're on top of that. And in Sweden as well, the people use a Swedish example of one way of dealing with the crisis. They would admit that they neglected their care sector. So we can't just look at the NHS on its own. You've got to look at the NHS as well as the care sector. And when partnerships with India are concerned, this is something we've spoken about, Dilip, and we've all spoken about, Sangeeta, that we can partner much more with India. And I think with India's huge expertise, look at the number of Indians who work in the NHS, whether it's nurses, whether it's doctors, whether it's surgeons. We've got to make more of that.
And on this one, Karan, I really think we should carry on this conversation. Like I said, during COVID, 4,500 hotel rooms. We added a telemedicine layer over them, and the initial patients could be screened so that we knew when they needed to be shifted to the hospital. This was effective triaging. Imagine if we could do that, how cost effective and how improved in quality it would be for the care homes. So we must talk about these kind of things and figure out how innovation, adaptability, and skill sets from around the world can come to bear upon every situation. So thanks for raising that, Dilip.
Yeah, okay. So there's another question from Sheila to the panelists. This is, as Britain is getting into the post-pandemic Brexit mode, what must it do to remain an FDI magnet?
Does Philip want to answer that first?
Sorry, yes, I'll have a go at that. I sort of answered it last time I spoke by saying that out of the EU, the FDI regulations or shackles of the European Union are less and easier to overcome dealing direct with us. We have a very, very good minister who will welcome you to sit down and roll out the carpet for any FDI. Jerry Grimston, who was appointed recently just to look at inward investment. Jerry actually is a huge India fan, knows India extremely well. So we are really focusing on that. If the question was linking that to Brexit, as Lord Bilimoria has already said, we're out. We've done it. We are exited from the European Union. There are a few little things to sort out, but we're out. So we welcome FDI. So how will it affect FDI? I believe that London is still the best city to work in and raise funds, and its financial services are beyond doubt the best. Our universities are one of the best in the world. Indian universities are brilliant. The partnerships in health you've already heard about. We're open for business, and FDI, come on in. And as I've said, going the other way to India, I think we just need to do a little bit more work on partnerships. But that's my feeling.
So just to add to that, I mean, what Philip said, I want to reiterate, the UK has always been one of the top 2 or 3 countries in the world for inward investment. I mean, that's quite a feat. And one of the main reasons for that is we've always been a very open economy. Since the middle of the 1980s, when Margaret Thatcher opened up Britain, opened up the city of London, we have been a magnet for investment. And it's a great country to do business in, a great country to have your global headquarters as well. And we've got to maintain that openness and that perception of openness as an open economy. It's there. And as Philip says, it can be there even more so now. And we've got to maintain, otherwise the perception is, oh, you're closing in, you're getting inward looking, you're getting protectionist. Well, that's not the case at all. It's exactly the opposite.
Exactly.
And the other reason, the reason why we're so an attractive investment, open economy, but all the institutions that we have. I mean, our universities are, along with America, the best in the world. They are phenomenal universities. The capability in financial services. London is always the number 1 or 2 financial center in the world. And then you take the accountancy services, the lawyers, our legal services we have, our courts, our sense of justice, the creative industries in every facet. Even manufacturing is 10% of our GDP. And the manufacturing that we have, and JCB is a shining example, I'd like to say we are a good example as well of world-class manufacturing. So if you have that aerospace, I mean, you name it, we're one of the biggest aerospace industries in the world. People don't appreciate that enough. So with all that capability and an open economy, you are a magnet for inward investment.
Yep.
Thank you for that. And I think there's an interesting question in the chat box, and this is very relevant, at least to some of us on the call. Given that in these times, the revenues are declining for chambers, how do chambers and industry associations, how do we pivot, and what can we do to actually survive as industries look at it?
Do you want me to have a go?
Please.
Or Sangeeta, would you like to?
No, Karan, it's all yours.
Well, you see, this is where what is the added value? And again, the true test of leadership is not in the good times. It's in a time of crisis. And again, I saw this at the CBI. The moment this happened, you have to act so quickly and proactively to the benefit of your members. So within days, we had a coronavirus hub up and running, on a phenomenal hub that was updated with latest information on the crisis, on the government help that's available. People didn't know where to look, where to apply, and we did that. Then the second thing we did was, let's not just have this for our members. Let's make this open to all business. And this is when you've got to be magnanimous. In fact, we went so far as offering free 6-month membership to anyone. This is when we've got to help everyone in business. So if you can act in that way, and then you show continue, then we had daily webinars. So we had webinars every day where we bring in ministers, bring in industry experts every single day. Thousands of people would listen, and again, open to everybody, not just your members. So when you act proactively, then you show the value that you're adding to business in the toughest of times, and people realize the support that you can give throughout on an ongoing basis, and that's when you show your real value.
I don't see any hands raised or any more questions there.
So, Dilip, there was one question in terms of the universities, which I think is a very valuable one. Lord Karan, I think everyone would love to hear your views. The fact that, parents are worried about sending their kids abroad. The UK universities, as has been stated, are undoubtedly world-class. This is a time to quickly put together some global partnerships where you can do dual degrees, spend a year in your hometown and then come to UK to finish up that. Can we do a joint program between FICCI and CBI, bring together universities on both sides and talk about this bridging year or this unusual year?
So here's an idea. Here's an idea that we can run with. But before that, about safety. I mean, I have 2 children at university at the moment, different university in the UK.
As do I.
There you are. And they take huge efforts to be flexible in terms of some lectures online, some face-to-face, processes and protocols in place for testing and if somebody is positive, and isolation. So they've got great systems. And the university sector has been hugely adapted in this, to your point, Sangeeta. They've been an example to that. Very tough circumstances. So I think that side of it's great. How do they collaborate more together? Well, in the UK, the research and development and innovation, we spend 1.7% of GDP on R&D and innovation. Germany spends 3.1%. America spends 2.8%. Israel spends 4%. And we've got a target to go up to 2.4% and then up to 2.7%. 1% extra of GDP to us is 20 billion pounds more per year. That's hugely powerful of what we can do if we invest more in R&D and innovation. And a lot of that goes to universities. A lot of that goes through business as well, and business and universities working together. Now, we have a scheme between the India and the UK called the UKERI scheme, which is academic to academic research that has been going now for over a decade. It came out of the UK-India Roundtable. It's now in phase 3. It's been so popular that academics get funded by both countries to work on a project, and it twins universities, it twins academics between India and the UK. Now, why don't we go one step further? Why don't we have a new initiative where we have a project and it's 2 universities working together, one from India, one from the UK, but also business. A business is also involved in that project, in that research. So bringing universities and business together between the 2 countries.
So we would be totally happy to find a way to take that to the next level.
And thanks, Dipankar Chakravarti, for raising that question. Thank you, President. I think we are at 5:58, and we were promised to end at 6. So I will, President, would you like to conclude?
No, I would just like to say a very, very heartfelt thank you, and look forward to further conversations, further opportunities explored, and let the changing geopolitical dynamic work in the favor of our countries and our people. Thank you so much, and namaste. And remember that India knew namaste before COVID. So it's the COVID smart thing to do.
So thank you, President, and thank you, Philip. Thank you, Lord Karan Bilimoria. Thank all the participants for joining, and Manish, Gunvina, Praveen, and team for putting it together. And thank you, Param, for driving it from the UK. Please stay well, stay safe, and we are sure we have a lot of action points arising out of this conversation, and we will take them forward under the leadership of President Dr. Reddy and, of course, Lord Bilimoria, with Philip, actually enabling it on the ground. So thank you very much, and have a good day in UK, and have a good evening in India.
Thank you. Thanks, Philip. Thanks,
all the very much. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Great pleasure. Look forward to seeing you.
All the best. Thank you very much. Thanks. Bye.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much.